It's romantic for the man to keep trying because he knows that deep down they belong together, that they're meant to be. If you heard my last podcast, you know what I think about meant to be. But like, if our movies are telling us that it's romantic to keep trying, to not let love go, no wonder so many men are not taking the initial no for an answer.
This is the Deep Dive with Adam Roa.
What is up, Deep Divers? It's me, your host, Adam Roa, and thank you for joining me for another Deep Dive podcast. This one is another musing, so it's just you and I today, and I want to dive into the topic of the masculine heart. The exploration of masculinity, our sexuality, our sensitivity. And this has been inspired by the release of my new song, Go, which is coming out on Friday, featuring Angus Wilson and Adam Knight. And it was inspired because the three of us were going through the same thing at the same time, which was we had deep, deep love for these women we had been dating. And yet all three women had gone in various different ways that weren't exactly the easiest to deal with. If you listen to my last track, Voices, you probably know some of the history of my experience. And as Angus, who's this incredible producer and the musician, singer, songwriter extraordinaire that is Adam Knight, we went down into studio and we just said, what do we want to write about? Like, what is on our hearts? And this song, Go, has such a sensitivity to it. It has such a vulnerability to like, come back. And I don't think that that's often talked about when we're talking about masculinity. We're talking about the sensitivity of a man and our relationship with love. And so I want to give a bit of my perspective around this topic today. And before I dive into that, I want to read one of the reviews that Svotete has said. And he says about the deep dive, Adam puts himself out there for our benefit! Exclamation point. Adam's podcast is so real and full of great nuggets that are easy to relate to. I love tuning into his podcast often. Adam's messages are always so direct and relevant. I've been listening for a couple years now, and I'm so grateful for his work and vulnerability. Highly recommend 5 stars. Svotete, thank you for being a part of this for the last several years. I really appreciate it. And for all of you who've been getting value from this podcast, it would mean the world to me if you would take the time, 30 seconds, to leave a review, subscribe on YouTube and Spotify and all the places, and be sure to share this out with anyone you think could benefit from it, because that is how the word spreads and how we all start to elevate together. And now, the exploration of the masculine heart. What it means to be a man in today's day and age. You see, I think one of the preconceived notions is that men don't care. I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions that we have around masculinity in general, is that we are not emotional beings. And that's not entirely the fault of whoever's perceiving that. That's also because as men, we're often shown these examples in our media of what it means to be a man, which is to be tough. Don't let them see you cry. Boys don't cry. There's no crying in baseball. Like all of these things where we have been told that emotions are for women. Being emotional is the sign of a woman, and a masculine man just takes it on the chin. Toughen up, rub some dirt on it. And so not only are we perceived as being that, because that's what everyone's seeing, but we think that that's supposed to be the way it is. I'm supposed to be that tough. I know for myself, I didn't cry for 9 years. I shut myself down because I went through an experience where I was at soccer practice and I got into a fight with a teammate of mine, like an actual fight where, I mean, we're 7, I think, something like that. And so we're trying to like jump kick each other and like kick at each other and like throw water bottles at each other. So it was like one of those, but it was a physical fight. And all of a sudden I hear, Adam! And I was like, what? And my dad is yelling at me from the sideline, and he had come to pick me up. And so I lower my head and I grab my water bottle and I walk over, and he gets into the car, and I don't even get in the passenger seat. I crawl into the back seat of the sedan and I lay down and I'm crying. Like I'm bawling. This is the first fight I've ever been in. And my dad starts to back the car out, and then he stops. He stops the car and he turns around and he says to me, if you're going to fight, then fight, but don't cry like a little girl. And then he keeps driving. I didn't cry for 9 years after that. I completely shut down that part of my emotional experience because I just didn't want to disappoint my dad. I also now have this understanding that I also didn't feel safe to show emotion around my family at that stage. And I think so many men have a story like this, whether it's a movie that they saw, whether it's their parental figure or role model that said something like that to them, or whatever it might be, that it is pervasive through society. I literally on Twitter just the other day, and Twitter is a place you can get so many different things, but what I saw was a comment, a tweet from a relatively well-known woman who said, if I'm ever with a man who gets beat up in a fight, I'm dumping him because I don't want to be with a weak-ass man. This is something that is in the collective ethos, and it is affecting the masculine heart and what it means to be sensitive and what it means to feel and the confusion that can happen. And this is not, I'm not asking for pity. I'm not asking for anything other than to give you some understanding of the confusion that can happen in a young man to feel all the feelings, because we feel them. That's the thing. We feel them. And yet see all these reflections around us telling us that we shouldn't, or at the very least, we shouldn't show them. And then complicated by that is sexuality. There's the emotional component. And then when you add sexuality and all of those same role models, all of those same movies and movie stars that basically get the girl. Not only do they get the girl, but all the other women that they want to have if they wanted it, right? The idea is that the more women you sleep with, the more masculine you are. You are more of a man when you have sex with more women. And to do that, quite honestly, in my experience and in my opinion, there has to be some level of disconnect from the emotional component to sex. To be deeply emotionally connected, like deeply emotionally connected to the act of sex, and yet be going out and having sex with a different woman every night is very difficult to do. And so I feel like when it comes to sexuality, we're being told that we should have sex with everyone that we want. Like as a man, we should be ready to go. We should be down DTF, right? Every single moment of every single day. If you don't want to have sex with an attractive woman, there's something wrong with you. You're not a man. You're not man enough. And then at the same time, our sexuality is vilified. When you look at what is happening with the Me Too movement, when you look at what is happening with, by the way, I don't condone in any ways. This is separate from the very obvious misuse of power and the objectification of women and all of these things. However, it does tie together. And when you see the Me Too movement and where that began to even amplify tremendously was this vilification of male sexuality, as if the man's sexual drive and sexual desires are primal, they're bad, essentially. They cause harm. And I can relate to this personally because as someone who was sexually abused by a man when I was 5 years old, I took on a belief system that I didn't even know that I had until later in life. And I started uncovering this, which was that it is unsafe to be the object of a man's sexual desire, one, and that a man's sexual desire causes pain. It causes damage. It hurts people. And it wasn't until I was, I want to say 31 or 32 years old, and I had this experience of my sexual energy actually healing someone else, not even through sex or anything sexual, but just the running of sexual energy. And this woman breaking down and tearing cries and sobbing and saying that was so healing for me, that I had an actual tangible experience of my sexual energy, not sex. My sexual energy can heal someone. What is up, deep divers? Pardon the interruption. I just wanted to take a moment to let you know about the Create community. It is the collective renaissance of education, art, transformation, and entertainment. And we are having live online events every single week. And this is where I actually teach my energetic wizardry class every week alongside some of the most epic personal development facilitators that I personally know. And if you have been looking for the place where you can go, like a modern mystery school, like where you can go and learn about things like business and astrology and gene keys and the energetics of how to create your reality, this is the place for you. This is a growing community. We would love to have you. Visit thecreatecommunity.com to join. It completely flipped my worldview upside down. And they talk about this in the ancient schools of Tantra and mysticism around sexual energy and the power that it holds. And so when we have this power to have sexual energy heal, only to be told that our sexual energy causes pain, and yet at the same time be told that we need to have sex with as many people as possible to be a man, there's so much confusion. When you pair that up with the emotional confusion, men are confused. I have been confused. Is it okay for me to go up and tell a woman that she's beautiful? I think she's beautiful. The funny thing is, if she doesn't find me attractive, that's sexual harassment. If she finds me attractive, it's flattering. How are we supposed to know that? Again, one more aspect. I'm just like on a roll with these, but I want to give you another example. The more examples I can give you of this, I feel like it can really land for some people. Another example that I hear from women all the time is like, why doesn't this man understand that this is a no? Like, I'm not going to go out with you. I'm not interested. And yet they keep pursuing it. And yet when we watch movies, it's romantic. It's romantic for the man to keep trying because he knows that deep down they belong together, that they're meant to be. If you heard my last podcast, you know what I think about meant to be. But like, if our movies are telling us that it's romantic to keep trying, to not let love go, no wonder so many men are not taking the initial no for an answer. This is what I mean. This is not for sympathy. This is simply to give you awareness you may not have had around the confusion that I believe most men on this planet are experiencing. And it has become incredibly unsafe of an environment that everyone is walking on eggshells. And so how are we ever going to resolve this uncertainty? How are we ever going to arrive at a space where we can bring into wholeness and healing sexuality and masculine emotions if we can't even talk about it? And so that's what this has been. I'm not here necessarily providing solutions in this podcast. I'm not giving you some tangible takeaways. You know what? Screw that. Let me give you a tangible takeaway. The next time that you are in a situation, the next time that you are feeling something emotionally and you feel conflicted internally about it, or you're in a situation where you feel like you can't show that emotion, I want you to remember this. I want this moment to click in your head. And I want you to ask yourself, why do I feel like I can't show that emotion? Why do I feel like I can't let a tear out or a scream out? Why do I feel like it's not okay to feel what I'm feeling? Because everything you are feeling is worthy of being felt. How you choose to take that emotion and act upon it, that is on you. And hopefully you're doing it in a way that does not cause harm to other people. But everything you feel is worthy of being felt. And to women, to all of you who are listening to this right now, my hope is that this awareness provides a little bit of compassion. Because I know for myself, there have been times that I have been made to be the enemy because I'm a man. And my hope is that the next time you're in a situation where a man doesn't take your initial no and say, I'm not interested, and they try one more time. Or the next time that you get asked out by someone, instead of taking it as harassment, just at least have the openness to maybe this person's a little confused. Maybe this person isn't entirely tactful, but that doesn't mean they're malicious. And I want to repeat and be very clear about this to all of the men and women out there: sexual harassment, sexual abuse, sexual misconduct. It's not okay. We get to do better. There is not a place for it in our society. It is not a part of a loving new paradigm that we are here to create. As someone who has been the victim of sexual abuse, as someone who has had my boundaries crossed by women as an adult, I understand what that feels like. I also can only imagine what it must feel like to be a woman in today's day and age and walk around and be objectified, overtly sexualized, and treated like they are our property. We get to do better, but it starts by recognizing the compassion that's available in this conversation for each other. That's what I hope that this podcast has done, is raise the awareness so that you can have more choice in how you react and respond in these circumstances moving forward. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. It went in a whole different direction than I kind of thought it was going to go at the beginning of this podcast, but it's so important. And all of this confusion, this pain, the sadness, the anger, not knowing what to do, inspired my new song, Go, which is coming out on Friday. You can click the link in the show notes to pre-save it and be one of the first to hear it. And unlike most people, you're going to know what inspired it. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. Thank you for being a part of this deep dive tribe. I want to remind you that always, in all ways, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved.